Hi everyone, I'm Anita Sharma and you are watching A News live from Baku. Here's what's making news right now. The Damascus dilemma, celebrations and concerns with public institutions closed and long queues at bakeries and food banks. Countries around the world are reacting to an historical development in Syria. Protests against the president continue in South Korea. We begin in Syria. The country has awakened to a new chapter in its history, one day after rebels seized the capital of Damascus, forcing President Bashar al-Assad to flee to Russia. The city is filled with both hope and uncertainty.
Damascus was calm but emotional on Monday. As life in the city began to stabilize, heavy traffic returned to the streets and people ventured out after a nighttime curfew. In public squares of Damascus, celebrations unfolded. People stood on abandoned military tanks, taking photographs to commemorate a moment they had long dreamed of. For many, the fall of Assad's regime was deeply personal, bringing emotional reunions and heartfelt expressions of relief.
Thank God we came back. People returned to their homes. Those who saw their families after 13 years of not seeing them. We returned to our country and saw our families and loved ones. Thank God.
I cannot describe the feeling. It's a dream we haven't woken up from yet.
Thank God. We are very relieved and feel reassured. We were scared, terrified, and living a nightmare inside a big prison. Thank God. God has granted relief to everyone.
Despite the celebrations, the city's challenges are evident. Public institutions remain closed, public transport is absent, and long lines form at bakeries and food stores. Small groups of armed men patrol areas like Meze, offering reassurance to residents. Prime Minister Mohamed Ghazi Jalali, now leading the transitional government, is working to maintain stability. The central bank has reassured citizens that deposits remain untouched and that financial operations continue as normal. The future of Syria now rests in the hands of a rebel alliance led by Ahmad al-Shara, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Golani. While promising religious tolerance and a representative government, the group faces the immense challenge of uniting a deeply fragmented nation.
While the world is watching Syria, especially those who left the country to seek refuge in Turkey during the civil war. Now, amid the collapse of Assad's government, many Syrians are finally returning to their homeland.
At the Cilvegazi border gate in Hatay, families and individuals gathered early Monday, eagerly waiting to cross back into Syria. To ensure smooth processing, gendarmerie teams managed the flow of people with an additional checkpoint set up 5 kilometers from the border. Many expressed joy and relief at the chance to return home after years in exile. Some had lived in Turkey for over a decade, building new lives but always longing for their homeland. Others described the end of the conflict as a moment of liberation and expressed deep gratitude to Turkey for its support during difficult times. Families with young children and the elderly were among those making the journey, cherishing the opportunity to rebuild their lives in Syria.
12 days. That's how long it took for an armed anti-government group to take control of Syria. The rebel group, led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, worked its way from the northern part of the country, taking over a string of cities, making its way south to the capital of Damascus. Their aim, to overthrow Syria's president, Bashar al-Assad. November 27th marks day one. The rebel group leads a large-scale offensive in the northwestern part of the country, attacking Syrian troops and taking control of 15 villages. The Syrian government responds with airstrikes in an attempt to halt insurgent advances. 3 days after the insurgent group commences its attack, the rebel group enters the city of Aleppo. This marks the first time the insurgents entered the city after they were pushed out in 2016. Only 1 day after the invasion of Aleppo, the city falls into the hands of the rebel group, who essentially takes control of the international airport. Aleppo is the first city taken by the rebel group from the Syrian government. By the fifth day, with Aleppo conquered and the Syrian army fighting off an advancing anti-government group, Iran's foreign minister visits the Syrian capital to meet with Bashar al-Assad, assuring Iran's support. By December 2nd, though, the insurgent group is now advancing towards the city of Hama. Just 3 days later, Hama falls into the hands of the rebels. The city is now the second snatched by the rebel group. By December 6th, the anti-government group moves toward the city of Homs, seizing 2 towns in the city's outskirts. Homs, as you know, is a gateway to Damascus. Capturing it would essentially cut the link between Damascus, Assad's seat of power, and the coastal region where he had wide support. The city of Homs falls under rebel control the next day after government forces abandoned it. The insurgents announced their plans to carry out the final stage of their offensive, taking control of the capital. The mayor of the Iraqi border town of Al-Qaim says around 2,000 Syrian soldiers crossed into Iraq to seek refuge from the advancing rebel groups. By December 8th, 12 days after beginning their offensive, the anti-government group enters Damascus. Reports surface of Assad fleeing the country, with the presidential palace now invaded by civilians. The rebel group also takes to state media to announce its presence. 1 day after the capital is taken over by the insurgent group, Assad's military loses complete control of all major cities. That brings to an end 50 years of rule by the Ba'ath Party.
The world is reacting to the monumental collapse of Bashar al-Assad's decades-long rule in Syria. Leaders and officials from across the globe have shared their hopes for the country's future, emphasizing the need for peace, stability, and inclusive governance.
As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States will work with our partners and the stakeholders in Syria to help them seize an opportunity to manage the risks.
From Washington to Berlin, leaders express cautious optimism and hope for reconciliation, while the German chancellor called the end of Assad's rule of a good news for now.
Today we stand with all Syrians who are full of hope for a free, just and safe Syria. They fervently hope that there is now a chance to rebuild their country and embark on the long and difficult road to reconciliation.
As the situation draws more and more attention, regional powers are voicing their commitment to supporting Syria's stability.
In the coming process, we hope for a Syria where different ethnic and religious groups live under an inclusive understanding of government and in peace. We are ready to provide the necessary support for this.
The United Kingdom stresses the need for a political solution while safeguarding civilian lives.
It is a good thing that Assad is gone, a very good thing for the Syrian people. What we must also ensure as we go through this, the rejection of terrorism and violence, that civilians are protected, minorities are protected, and that can only be through a political process. That's what we're talking to allies in the region about at the moment.
The United Nations emphasized the importance of inclusivity in shaping Syria's future.
So I hope that within this current environment, that obviously there will be this inclusive, very inclusive dialogue that involves, we always talk about women, peace and security, that involves women, that involves young people, that involves each and every segment of the Syrian society.
Other global powers call for Syria's sovereignty and the voice of its people to be prioritized.
The future and destiny of Syria should be decided by the Syrian people. We hope all parties will find a political solution to restore stability and order.
We seek for the will of the Syrian people to prevail through democratic mechanisms. What the people of Syria desire must be realized.
As Syria embarks on a new chapter, the world watches closely. The coming days will be critical in shaping the nation's future.
Bashar al-Assad had ruled Syria for over 2 decades, with his last public appearance just 1 week ago when he met with the Iranian foreign minister in Damascus and vowed to, quote, crush rebel forces. Now, Russian reports of him fleeing to Moscow have sparked further speculation about his future and his legacy.
Bashar al-Assad, born in 1965, became the president of Syria in July 2000, following the death of his father, Hafez al-Assad, who had ruled Syria for 3 decades. Trained as a doctor, Bashar had no early ambitions for politics, but was pushed into leadership after his older brother's death. Upon assuming power, he promised economic and political reforms, though his critics believe he failed to deliver on his promises.
في الوحدة والحرية والاشتراكية.
In 2011, after the Arab Spring uprising sparked protests in Syria demanding political reforms, Assad's government responded with crackdown, escalating into a brutal civil war. Over 465,000 people have been killed and millions have fled the country. Despite international condemnation and calls for his resignation, Assad had retained power, aided by foreign support. Assad was also the leader of the Ba'ath Party, which had been dominating Syrian political landscape for decades. According to experts and human rights organizations, Assad's government has been associated with numerous human rights abuses, including the use of chemical weapons against civilians. Reports from various organizations, including the UN, have documented widespread torture, imprisonment, and the suppression of political opposition. In 2007 and 2011, Assad won re-election with overwhelming results, but these elections were widely criticized. Despite the devastation of the war and the collapse of the large parts of the country, Assad had refused to step down, rejecting Western-style democracy and insisting his power is legitimate under the Syrian constitution.
Friedrich Merz, German opposition leader and chancellor candidate, met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. He criticized Berlin's military aid policies and called for increased support. Merz condemned Germany's limits on longer-range weapons, saying it forces Ukraine to fight with, quote, one hand tied behind its back. He urged the enabling of Ukraine to target Russian military bases. Zelensky stressed the need for NATO membership and security guarantees, noting Vladimir Putin's unwillingness to end the war. He also discussed proposals for foreign troops to bolster Ukraine's security.
Our position is clear,
as is the position of our parliamentary fraction. We want your army to be capable of hitting military bases in Russia, not the civilian population, not infrastructure, but military targets from which your country is being attacked. And I said it a few weeks ago in the German parliament. With these range limits, we're forcing your country to fight with one hand tied behind your back. This is not our position.
Zwingen wir ihr Land mit einem Hand auf dem Rücken zu gehen.
Tensions are boiling over in Tbilisi as mass protests grip the city, calling for political accountability and reform. With clashes escalating and arrests rising, let's get more from our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili, who brings us the latest updates from the ground.
Hello, News 69 correspondent from Tbilisi. Let's review and assess the situation and protests against the Georgian party, which have been escalating for the past 12 days. Political crisis and intense demonstrations are worsening daily. Hundreds of citizens have been arrested and quiet, while dozens, including the journalists, injured. Georgian media outlets broadcast live footage of the violence, daily showing masked special forces in Tbilisi attacking citizens of political media representatives. Despite this, no legal cases have been initiated against law enforcement officials involved in the violence. What has sparked these protests in Georgia, which are bringing the country on the edge of the civil war? The demonstrations began after the Georgian Prime Minister announced the suspension of negotiations with the European Union until 2028 and moved that violated Georgia's constitution. In response, protests spread from the capital to other cities as citizens took to the streets to protect their constitution. Georgia's legitimate president Salome Zurabishvili, the opposition forces and their supporters rejected results of October 26 elections. They are demanding of Afrin's resignation and the announcement of new democratic elections. The ruling Georgian Dream Party denies these accusations, claiming the protests are orchestrated by opposition parties to destabilize the country. Prime Minister Kabachizek has accused the demonstrators of promoting unrest through what he calls liberal fascist ideology. Parliamentary Speaker Shalova Bashar has repeated these sentiments, adding that the protests are being financed by European Union. Meanwhile, Georgian representatives present a contradictory narrative. They assure their supporters that Georgia remains committed to European while criticizing the moves from European Union and US towards Georgia. They also demand greater initiative and effective steps from Western powers. Iraqi Gabafizek has expressed claims for the support from the West, particularly from the potential Trump administration to legitimize the elections. 2 days ago, President Salome Zurabishvili, Georgia's pro-European and internationally recognized political leader, has met with Western leaders, including Donald Trump, on the opening ceremony of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. She stated that she had discussed Georgia's leaked elections with him and emphasized that the Georgian people consider Trump as a threat. For 12 consecutive nights, demonstrators have gathered in front of Parliament calling for a change of government and urging the EU to impose sanctions. Today, the EU ambassador of Georgia, Babel Kryczynski, confirmed that sanctions are under preparation, signaling Europe's readiness to act. In a move that many see as a dismissive of the protest, the Tbilisi mayor, aligned with the Georgian Party, has already erected the Christmas tree in front of the parliament. A ceremonial lighting of the trees planned very soon, further highlighting the government's disregard for the ongoing protest.
In face of recent escalations, South Koreans keep protesting in the streets of Seoul to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. The president.
Thousands of demonstrators in Seoul braved the cold once more to demand South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol to be impeached on Monday, saying it was not enough to just apologize for trying to impose martial law last week. Yoon survived an impeachment vote in parliament on Saturday after his botched attempt at imposing martial law last Tuesday, and tens of thousands of South Koreans then rallied to demand his resignation.
The president's statement cannot be that short and just saying sorry. It's not supposed to end just like that. The people were so scared that night after martial law was declared and couldn't sleep well for the last few days, but he just tried to end it with few words. I don't think it's the right way to end the situation, and I'm very disappointed about that.
Protesters expressed anger and disappointment over Yoon's latest statement, where he said he was leaving his political and legal fate with his ruling People Power Party, but did not resign. Yoon, several cabinet ministers, military commanders and police officials face criminal investigations over their actions. The police and the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials have all launched probes into Yoon and the officials, seeking to pursue charges of insurrection and abuse of power, among others.
Prosecutors must conduct a thorough investigation on Yoon Suk-yeol, and for everybody that can, I think all of the people should gather at the protest to impeach Yoon, instead of letting him resign. We should do a referendum and impeach him.
The Korea Confederation of Trade Unions, who led Monday's protest, estimated about 30,000 people rallied again near Parliament. In light of recent events, Yoon Suk-yeol has faced a travel ban after establishing martial law for several hours before lifting it completely. The South Korean president is facing potential impeachment again, despite the fact that his party has decided not to vote for it. Demonstrations all across South Korea keep on happening, and with a crashing stock market, the country is currently not in the best of positions.
To Taiwan now, which raises its military alert as China boosts its presence near the island following President Lai Ching-te's recent Pacific trip. Tensions between the two sides continue to intensify.
China has established 7 temporary airspace zones around Taiwan. It has also deployed naval and coast guard vessels in the area. This follows the head of the Taiwanese administration's recent trip to Hawaii and Guam. China viewed the trip as a provocation. In response, China established airspace zones off Fujian and Zhejiang provinces and deployed nearly 90 ships near Taiwan. Taiwan then activated combat readiness exercises and expressed concerns over China's gray zone tactics, such as frequent air and sea missions. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin warned that China aims to disrupt the international order.
You know that this theater has been described as our pacing challenge. And I described it as our pacing challenge because the PRC is the only country in the world that has the intent and increasingly the capability to change the rules-based international order.
China defended its actions as a necessary response to Taiwan.
First of all, I would like to tell you that there is no defense ministry in Taiwan. Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory. The question of Taiwan is an internal affair of China, and China will firmly safeguard its national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
China claims Taiwan as an inseparable part of its territory and rejects foreign interference.
That's all from our team. Thank you so much for watching A News. Visit us online at anews.tv. Bye for now.